So guys, welcome to the podcast. We had a little bit of audio issues, but what's this podcast, honestly, without some issues? I swear every episode we have some sort of issue. I got a comment, there it is, that the audio is good. So guys, welcome to the Raw Christian Podcast. My name is Brian, and joined with me today is special guest John Lemar. Today's episode is going to be raw, it's going to be vulnerable, it's going to be honest, and we're going to dive deep into John's testimony, John's life, and it's just going to be awesome, guys. For those of you, this is your first time joining in, welcome. If you could please like this broadcast, like the video on Facebook and on YouTube, and if you could please share this broadcast on your feed or to some friends that may need to hear this. This is going to be an amazing testimony and amazing interview that we're going to do today. So thank you guys for tuning in. Let's go ahead and get started. John, we're going to go ahead and pull up these notes here, and we're just going to dive in, man.
Let's do it.
So, take me back to what was your life like before the Marines? This is the Marines, right?
Mm-hmm.
Take me back to before the Marines. What was life like? What was your upbringing like? What was life like before you enlisted in the military?
Yeah, so I was born and raised in Alaska.
Okay.
When I was a baby, I was just a couple months old, I was in a car wreck. My mom was killed by a drunk driver. I think 3 or 4 people died in that wreck. I was right beside my mom when she died, and crazy how crazy and violent of a wreck it was. I didn't even have a scratch on me.
Wow.
My dad was driving. He got jacked up, but it was more of a emotional, spiritual impact on him. He then raised me, for a period of time by himself, and he was an alcoholic throughout my childhood, which, to be real, I've never told my dad, how dare you, or whatever, because I can't imagine that, that grief.
Wow.
So I was raised by my dad as an alcoholic. He then met my former stepmom, who's just very verbally abusive. The home life was just bred by chaos, chaos, strife, religion. I grew up in the church, going to church. I had 2 stepbrothers, a stepsister, and a half sister. Very, very tight. However, inside the home was just like, you go to church, you dress up, you smile, but there's no power, there's no living it outside of Sunday. And then I come home and I just see this, and I'm like, that, and then I go to church and I see this fake smile. I'm like, I know better than this. So I grew up just with a low tolerance of being fake. I'm just, let's call it like it is. Let's be real.
Yeah.
And it's probably because of that. And so, yeah, as much strife and tension there was in my home, a lot of there's physical abuse as well. No sexual abuse, thank God. However, in a lot of aspects, I had an amazing childhood because I grew up in Alaska and I just had,
the great outdoors.
The great outdoors. So as a kid, I would just take my longbow, my BB gun, my coonskin cap, and overalls, and just tear off into the woods. And then it was just me.
Wow.
And I had an awesome childhood. Got chased by moose, woke up in my fort overnight just as a kid, sleeping out in the snow overnight by myself.
Wow.
And I wake up, there's a bears going through my fire pit, or wolves chasing, fighting with a bull moose. And so I had this really eventful childhood of cool stuff.
Right.
So the outdoors is where I would escape all of this, so I grew up with this, I need to be hunting, I need to be fishing to get away. And so the outdoors, the woods, and the water became my safe place from a lot of my issues. Yeah. So that was my childhood. I fast forward, I ended up graduating high school in Tennessee and went off to the military. Um, and yeah, I didn't necessarily want to go into the military at first. I wanted to just move back here to Tri-Cities because I lived here for a period of time in between Alaska
Okay.
and Tennessee. And I was like, oh, I just want to go back because I got saved here
Hmm.
in 2008
Okay.
at a local church that's not Hungry Gen. And I was like, oh, I want to go back there. Is where my friends are. And so I didn't want to go into the military.
Hmm.
It wasn't until I was a senior or a junior in Tennessee, and I come out of the chow hall or the cafeteria, and there's the recruiter standing in the hallway with his table, and he's in his dress blues, just not trying to talk to anyone. He's just presence, and he's just standing there, jacked, tattoos, just like who wants to talk to me?
Hmm.
No one wanted to talk to the guy, and I don't blame him. But me, I did, but there was something preventing me.
Hmm.
And I come out and I'm like looking at him out of the corner of my eye, like feeling him out, and like he catches my eye from the middle of the group of people, and he does this like, and I'm like, and I just keep walking, and he's like, "Hey kid, come here," and I'm like, "No, thanks, that's not for me." And he's like, "No, come here." And I'm just walking backwards, and like, there's a lot of people around me. I mean, and he's like, "No, you come here now." And I'm like, "Okay." So, like, tail between my legs, go over there, and dude starts asking me some like legit questions. And he's not trying to recruit me. He's just like poking holes in my plan. And I'm getting upset because I'm like, I thought I had this thing figured out. I'm gonna go back to Washington. I'm gonna be a hunting fishing guide, and that's it. Um, and long story short, I go home because I was saved at the time, um, and I take it to the Lord. I'm like, okay, God, like you got me curious, like, but if this is from you, give me the desire to do it because I don't have it right now.
Hmm.
It's just an honest prayer.
Hmm.
And I was in reading Philippians at the time in chapter 2, and I open up, I start reading, I get down to verse 13 in the NLT, and it says, "For God is working in you, giving you the desire to obey Him and the power to do what pleases Him." And I was
Hmm.
like, all right.
Wow.
And man, it turned into a tenacious desire.
Hmm.
The Holy Spirit was giving me downloads, rhema words, like powerful, specific words for so many different things going through my mind. I had a record, a juvenile record. I got denied from the military 3 times. I got told I'd never be able to join any branch of service. I got laughed out of a recruiter's office, and then I just maxed out on pull-ups outside their office, and then they poked their head out, and they're like, "What was your name again?" Because I did more than they had anyone do before, and so it kind of like impressed them or something. And I just said, "Call me when you have a contract for me." And 2 years
Hmm.
later, I went to boot camp. But the reason that I stuck it out with the 2 years is because it was from God.
Hmm.
And all the times that I was told you will never be able to come, I didn't accept it because I knew that that's where the Lord called me. And it's crazy to have that shift from, I don't want this, give me
Hmm.
the desire if this is from you. And that's what the desire turned into.
Wow.
So that's up until the
So do
military.
you really think that that desire really came from the Lord? Because I imagine during those 2 years, the world could have offered you a lot of opportunities. Were there any opportunities during those 2 years that you were on the verge of saying yes to, but you felt like maybe, someone was pulling you to that one specific thing, and that was to join the military?
There was nothing that came close.
Really?
There was nothing that was a consideration. There were, of course, the enemy will come try to plant seeds of doubt.
Right.
Um, but no, I just worked on a farm and I worked out. I pretty much my full time job because I wanted to be a special operator. I wanted to go all the way. And
Wow.
actually, I'll back up to when I was a senior. They had us the day before graduation. They gave us a piece of paper when I was a senior in high school, and they said, "Right where you see yourself in 10 years." and I wrote, I will be a sniper in Marine Special Operations Command, which is MARSOC.
Wow.
10 years later, that's exactly where I was.
Jeez.
And so I saw where the Holy Spirit called me to go and why. And so no, I didn't doubt it. I just prepared.
Wow. Wow. Dang. Coming from where I was at that age, um, I did not have that tenacity, like I think you did. Um, I mean, I had the strength to put my mind to something, but when it came to something that the Lord was putting in my heart, I mean, back during that, when I was that age, I did not have a relationship with the Lord, and so I don't, I couldn't really compare situations, right? But that's pretty cool. So what you wrote down is what you eventually became.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Um, I think that definitely uh, has to do, no, with no shadow of a doubt. I think that really has to do with what the Lord um, ordained
Yeah.
for you. Because I mean, there is that saying that write it on paper or set it in stone,
Yeah.
and it'll become, it'll manifest itself. But I don't think 100% of the time does it work unless God's favor is on it.
100%.
And just hearing from what you're saying, God's favor was on that for sure. So now take me through what boot camp was like for you. Was it kind of like a piece of cake, or was it, what kind, did it throw you for a loop? How was it for you transitioning from civilian into now you're in the military?
Okay, so I'm going to give my view because you're asking John.
Okay.
And if there's any veterans or active duty watching this, have your own opinion. I don't care. Like, I hated boot camp, and I didn't hate it because it was hard. I kind of thought it was stupid, to be honest, because my sights were on something higher.
Mm.
And so I was like, can we just be over with this? But it's kind of a funny perspective, but at the same time, I understood, but not as much as I do now, the importance of it. Boot camp, all the low level baseline stuff is necessary. And there is something called brilliance in the basics, because I can't, if I want to be performing at a special operations capacity, I got to learn what it takes to get there. And I can't overlook, in any area of our lives, we can't overlook the basics. You got to be able to perform the basics of any task, because that's the foundation that's laid on more advanced skills. And so I understood that, not as much as I would later on. But yeah, I was kind of frustrated. I was like, why do I got to get punched inside the head and get my face spit in? Like, because back then, like, it was still the real core. Like, there's no stress cards. There's no, like, when I first met my senior drill instructor, he punched me in the side of the head. Like, the side of the head, not, like, at least give me the respect. Punch me in the jaw, like, he punched me in the head. I'm like, dude, you just, what? And then I just got punched again. But yeah, I kind of had a little bit of a attitude a little bit initially, but I did graduate as the honor graduate of the company and got meritoriously promoted.
Wow.
So God's favor was on me right from the start.
And so how long was boot camp?
13 weeks.
13 weeks.
Yeah.
And you got promoted right after?
Yeah, like the day of graduating or something like that.
Wow.
The honor graduate of the company gets meritoriously promoted.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's cool. So yeah, God's favor right from the start.
Yeah.
So you said you had an attitude, but did you have an underlying mindset?
Yeah, and I won't even say, like, I say attitude to make light of the situation. It was more of like, I was so hungry for what I wanted to do,
Right.
that I was like I'm ready for, like, but I was still motivated, like,
For
I
sure.
would yeah.
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 Yeah. So wow. So through boot camp you had, you kind of had a little bit of a rebellious spirit, would you say? Or was it more
Potentially, probably.
okay?
Probably.
Right. But so
Yeah.
now transitioning into now you're out of boot camp, you're established in a position. What was uh tell me about, well, let's just go straight. Tell me about your first deployment.
Yeah.
And total, you had 3 or 4?
Four.
4.
Yeah, one was kind of weird. It was kind of split, but yeah, essentially 4.
Okay, so say so 4 total. So let's get into your first deployment. Um, what was? Tell me about the moment where you received the news that you were going to have you're going to be sent off on your first deployment. Where did they send you, and what was happening here when you received the news that you were going to go on your first deployment? Like what were you feeling?
I was ready to rock and roll.
Yeah.
Like so I started off in the infantry because of my juvenile record. I couldn't just get an immediate special operations contract, whether that be. Um, and first of all, what I ended up doing was MARSOC, which is a Marine Raider. A lot of people don't know what that is, but it's so each branch of the military has different subcomponent commands of Special Operations Command, SOCOM. So you have the Green Berets, the Navy SEALs, the Army Rangers, the Marine Raiders, and you got the PJs in the Air Force. But yeah, so because of that, I had to work my way up. And also MARSOC, you can't just go in off the street, go to boot camp, and then go try out. You have to do a whole enlistment before. So my vision was to set myself up for that. So I did my first deployment was in the infantry. I was bottom of the barrel infantry rifleman, and a pretty rough life. But yeah, I deployed to Southeast Asia, Philippines, stuff like that. I was in a boat company, did a bunch of we did like boat raids on beaches type stuff. But the deployment was just kind of whatever, just to be completely honest. And as soon as we got back, I took selection and went out for the battalion's scout sniper platoon. Made that, and then got ready, did the whole sniper school thing in preparation for my second deployment. So
Okay. All right. So during that deployment, was there um, was there any sort of like moment of like questioning or doubt where you were like, am I in the right place here, or was it like you were still right on course, you were still in your spirit, you were still steadfast on knowing that that's where the Lord had you?
yeah, I knew it's where the Lord had me, but I was excited for improvement in the next things, because there's a lot of great stuff in the infantry, a lot of great people and smart people. There's a lot of rock eaters and crayon eaters, like a lot of people that are just like, man, how do you tie your shoes in the morning? But there's so many brilliant and amazing warriors. So it's a interesting dynamic. So I got awesome leadership, and I got some leaders that honestly, at one point I said, "You're fired. I'm taking your job." And my squad leader heard me say this, and he just kind of and he didn't say anything, and he just sat back and kind of watched, and I outperformed him as a boot, and the guy sucked,
How
So yeah, that's kind of how the infantry is. It's like a dog eat dog, and back then we'd have things called bull in the ring, and if guys got a problem, go to the tree line. That's what we call it. Go to the tree line, hash it out. Generally, the platoon will make a circle, and you go in there and you duke it out, bare knuckle.
really?
And yeah, and it's called
Dang.
bull. It's called bull in the ring. Solves a lot of problems. And you shake and you're good, and it builds a cool brotherhood. And that's the Marine infantry for you. But yeah, I saw a lot of things in leadership that I was like, I'm going to take that and apply that in my life. But I saw just as many things. So I was like, I will never treat my subordinates that way. And I carry that on to my life, and I'll carry that on to my family and stuff like that. Like, that's not gonna, no one receives that. So,
Gotcha. So let's just talk about let's just cover all your deployments in general. So really quickly, can you just kind of paraphrase what your assignments were on each deployment, and then we'll go from there.
yeah. So second deployment, I was on a sniper team. I was assistant team leader. We had a 4-man sniper team, and we went to different parts of the Middle East and the Horn of Africa. Um, then I came back from that, did selection, and did pretty much it's like a 1.5 year process of assessment and selection, the individual training course, language school, jump school, all these different follow-on courses to whatever your billet is within the team. And then I get to my first MSOT, Marine Special Operations team, in 2016. And then did 5 years, deployed to Lebanon and to Afghan. Um, when I was in Lebanon, one of my friends got blown up in one of our sister teams in Afghan, and actually 3, but one of them he had to get flown home because it was so bad. He ended up living, but then I went to go replace him on the team.
Wow.
And so me and a friend, we essentially hitchhiked on C-130s to get to Afghan, and we made our way to reinforce that team. And that night I was in combat. So it was awesome. It was. I won't go into a lot of detail, but it was the pivot deployment that brought the Taliban to the treaty table. So there's only a handful of special operations teams from the U.S. One of them was mine, and there were no conventional forces operating. This isn't something you were seeing on the news. It was the real deal, real legit combat. And yeah, I got everything I ever wanted, to the point of be careful what you wish for. But yeah, it was all direct action combat, which means like we were doing helo assault force raids. You fly a helo in, you run into the dude's house, you shoot him in the face, and you go home and eat a breakfast burrito. So it was awesome, and
Wow.
that was the deployment.
So take me back to the first moment you saw combat.
Yeah.
What was going through your mind during that? Is it more of like a feeling of euphoria, like this is freaking awesome, like I've been dreaming about this? Was it like surreal? Was it like a reality check? Take me back to that.
Yeah. So there's this thing. I'll approach it kind of a different way. There's this thing called chasing the dragon within the military, and a lot of guys never get combat. It's the majority of people don't get combat, especially nowadays. Back after like early 2000s is a different story, but after about 2012, there was a shift, and so a lot of guys, they'll join and they'll want combat. Like, there's nothing wrong with that if your heart's in the right place. Like, you know, the Old Testament is full of warriors, doing mighty conquest for the Lord. So I can have that conversation with anybody. But a lot of times when people they don't get the combat, it really messes them up in a different way, because a lot of people be like, oh, post-traumatic stress from being in combat. But I've personally seen people that wanted it so bad and they idolized it, to that destroying them almost more than some people with post-traumatic stress from certain things that we saw. Wow. And experienced. So for me, I do believe my heart was right, but man, I remember I was smiling. I remember I was getting shot at, and there was a We dropped a 500-pound JDAM, which is a big bomb from an aircraft, onto a place that we were getting shot at. And I rolled off this rock, and I'm under this boulder. Two of my Afghan commandos are underneath the rock eating chocolate and just, oh, John, hello. And then there's rocks raining down from the explosion. And I'm just like, this is so cool. Finally, I'm here. And so I was like, man, I'm living a movie. And so I was literally I just had the biggest smile on my face. Yeah, I mean, I enjoyed my time. I really did. And I 100% attribute that to God's hand of favor. You mentioned favor earlier, and in Psalms it says he will surround you with favor like a shield. I had his shield of favor over my life, and I, other than that, I see it destroy so many people. Yeah, but for me, I can only say God's favor was with me.
So this is crazy because I actually didn't know this part about your story, about your testimony. I didn't know that you gave your life to the Lord prior to being in the military.
Yeah.
For some reason, I was under the impression that it was afterwards, which that part makes a little sense because you hear that all the time, right? So this kind of changes things a little bit in my perspective, and some of the questions that I want to ask, because going into the military, going into special forces, special ops, and seeing what you've seen, coming from a place where you've already have an established relationship with the Lord, how, in your perspective, how is that? How did that prepare you for what you saw versus hypothetically the opposite scenario, which is if you went into these situations without already having an established relationship with the Lord? How do you think that would have differed?
Yeah, I mean, so I have the personality that type of service attracts is more aggressive in nature.
For sure.
But there's still self-governance, self-control, right? It's kind of like, what's his name? Jordan Peterson talks about being a dangerous man, but being able to have it under control, right? And so it attracts that type of service mentality. So I still, whether I knew God or not, I enjoyed what I did, but not in. I don't want it to sound like I enjoyed killing people. I enjoyed the job, the service, the fulfillment of I'm making a difference, because I will do whatever is necessary, to protect my family back home and this and that and the other. But when you're there, it's just you and your bros, and it's it turns into we're just gonna make it home. And yeah, I mean, it's not a bloodthirsty type of thing. It's there's really good people there, the best type of people that and then you all make it out together when 95% didn't, and you're just kind of yeah, so.
Were you the only one or one of the only ones that had a faith background in your group?
There's a there were a lot of believers, but one thing I did see quite a bit is when people are torn away from their homes and then you go off and you're with all these guys doing whatever, a lot of compromise. So yeah, I saw a lot of lukewarmness. Yeah.
How, in moments in trying moments, if you were going into, you were in the heat of a mission, did you approach things differently, coming from that background with the knowing that you had God on your side, did you have a different mindset towards those missions, in carrying out those missions, maybe compared to either some of your other brothers or other team members?
Yeah, I mean, first let me be clear. Like, I was all about destroying the enemy. I still am. Um, being being a Christian, doesn't change that. It just helps me to do it the right way, I believe. Now, also, when I was saved, it's not like my faith now. I hadn't been to Hungry Gen. I didn't have as much understanding of the spiritual realm, spiritual warfare, the reality of these things. And I was also in a lot of pain. I was living a lukewarm life, um, and like, praise God, he still held on to me. So yeah, I mean, yeah, there was some guys there, but like my perspective was I'm going to, be there, and I still got friends into church, and friends got saved, and there was fruit in my life. Um, but it was different than now. I hadn't let go of certain things. I still had personal battles, certain things behind closed doors that I was compromising, and um, I needed deliverance, but I didn't know. I didn't know about deliverance.
For sure, for sure. Okay. So take me back to some of these missions that you were on, and of course, there's probably some details you're not allowed to share, but take me to one of the most like real as you can get combat special ops missions that you experienced. Um, I guess not really. I mean, include like what you're feeling, all that, but I'm more looking for like, I guess, just a raw story. Like take me back just to a moment where you're like, this is as real as it's gonna get.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. The a few come to mind, um,
Let's go for it.
but I'll go with this one. It was in the mountains in Afghan. We inserted on top of this mountain, and we were gonna hit this compound down in this valley. Uh, no U.S. forces had been there in quite some time. The reason we decided to go there is because we couldn't fly in the rest of the country because the weather was so bad. Our aircraft couldn't make it. And so were given the option, okay, we'll either take it easy tonight or we'll go here. And everyone was burnt out and tired, but no one's going to admit it. So, like, oh, yeah, we'll just go. And so we went. Um, and as we're inserting at night, everything we did was at night. We would insert at the beginning of the night and we would be gone before the sun rose. And so the place pretty much becomes a hornet's nest. Guys start coming out of these different buildings and squirting into the mountains, which is when they run out of the building and run away. They were armed, and we had different aircraft on station observing this and feeding us information. So we're in our own bird, we're flying in, and we're like looking at each other like, oh yeah, this is turning into something good. Like, all right, guys are getting excited. You see, you look and you see like your buddies on night vision, seem smiling, like nodding. It's cool. Like, it's a cool feeling. Um, so we run out, and I'd never been up at this area of the country before, and I'm the first one off of the bird when we land on top of the mountain because I would navigate to where we're going, and it just looked like Star Wars. It looked like some weird world, and it's just like being on the moon, kind of.
Okay.
It was cool, and there's a lot of details I'll kind of skim over just for sake of time, but we run over to this ridge, and we go to set up on this ridge line to overlook and do an ambush on some of the guys across the ridge that squirted out of the target building. And I ended up finding the guy, and I was the team sniper. So my team chief, his exact words were, "Johnny, go find that guy and kill him." I was like, all right, and so I go and I go set up, and it's like 500 meters across this valley, and end up finding the guy, and I shot him, and I initiated the ambush, and we had machine guns set up on the ridge line, and then just started mowing down whatever, and then we broke down position and go to down this draw to go down into the compound, and then start going building to building and doing our thing. So while we're moving down, I slipped off of a boulder, because this whole mountainside is made of boulders, like some the size of this house, some the size of a vehicle, like a shed, like massive boulders that are smooth and circular. And it's wintertime, and it's in the mountains, so there's like a little bit of snow, and like everything's frosted over and slippery. So I'm on top of this big boulder, and I have like 100 pounds of gear on, and I fall off this boulder, which would be like falling off this house, and I land on my leg, and then something cracked inside of my lower leg. And so not sure exactly what happened, but I couldn't walk. And I ended up using my bipod, my shooting sticks that I had just got in, actually, a tripod. And I ended up using that as a crutch to walk the rest of the way. And so I make it up into an elevated position, and some of my buddies and some of our Afghan special forces guys that are with us they're moving compound to compound, and I'm overwatching them from my position. And there was a lot of heat signatures on the other side of the valley. Throughout the night, I actually ended up shooting. I was down to my last mag, and I had 5 mags, and I was on my last one. It was a long night of a lot of shooting, and all of those rounds were like precision fire.
Wow.
So was busy. I remember as I was focusing on to the right on a heat signature, I took a shot, and then I see muzzle flashes and hear AK fire to my left. And my night vision is right here, and I see the light of the muzzle flash. And I turn over, and I pan over with my long gun, and I can see 2 guys in a cave shooting down at my buddies. They hit 2 of our guys. And they were actually the Afghan commandos that were with us, the special forces guys. And I ended up shooting one of them in the chest, and then I'm going over to shoot the other one. And as I'm squeezing the trigger, he blows up in my scope, because my friend down there had it's called a 203. He had a grenade launcher on below his M4, and he shot the guy with it's like point blank with a grenade. So he just exploded as I was squeezing off. So yeah, that was interesting. And then the night goes on kind of like that, and we drug those guys out, and our allies got too tired of carrying out their friends in body bags, and they just quit and went in to light up cigarettes and take a break. 19 people died that night. It wasn't the time to take a break. So that speaks to the character of some of them. And I had a possibly fractured leg, and I was trying to carry out the bodies. So it was a lot more happened that night, even including the scariest moment of my entire life so far was after that, a totally different thing as we're trying to get the bodies out of the mountains and get on the aircraft and leave. But yeah, man, that's just kind of some of the wave tops of that night. It was a kind of a chess match of like maneuvering on the enemy and them on us. Yeah, it was legit.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Wow. So you're talking about some moments that if it was any average Joe, they probably would have been like scared out of their mind, and just wanting to get out of there. But you are in a position where you're sticking to it because, like you said, it's a character thing. You have other guys that are, just want to take a break or maybe quit, but you're wanting to complete that mission. Where do you think that steadfastness comes from? Is it rooted in something? is there a reason why you're just like, we have to complete this mission, versus like every other person just wants to just take a break?
Yeah, I think part of also the waiting process of me between being called to go into the military and then actually that door being opened by the Lord, he was birthing certain things inside of me. He was awakening certain things that I needed to make it there. Because if I would have just had the opportunity, I potentially wouldn't have had all the desire.
Mm.
A lot of people come to me that say like, "Man, I want to go be in special operations. Help me. What do I do?" And they don't have the drive. It's like, if, you know, not everyone's made to do it, but like, if say if you have what it takes, like certain things like appear as well, then in the physical ability, then, because let's just be real, some people, like, no matter how much you want it, you're just not cut out for certain things, and that's okay. Maybe God has something different for you.
Yeah.
And so, um, but there still needs to be this drive and this like relentlessness of like, I will die before I quit. So I think that process, and even how I was raised in a tough childhood, like, was preparing me for that.
Mm.
And then also the training, it instills these different things within you.
For sure, for sure. Let's transition out from deployments, and let's transition now into what life was like outside of the military. So, what was, because I heard something about like your fourth deployment not finishing all the way, or there's something caused you to want to not re-enlist, and then you transitioned into civilian life. Tell me about that moment.
Yeah, no, so that was Afghan, and I finished, like, yeah, that was my favorite deployment by far. But no, I was actually, so how I told you, I was in Lebanon and I went and reinforced that team in Afghan. And right before I got called to do that, I was praying and I was like, Lord, I want to get out of the military and I want to move on and raise a family. Um, and I had this vision for what I wanted my life to be like. And I loved the military, but I hadn't finished what I had been called to. I felt like I don't want to get out unfulfilled. I want to serve and have this like feeling of like, I don't want to chase the dragon, like why I brought it up earlier.
Right.
So yeah, and I got a word. I don't remember exactly what it was. I have it highlighted in my Bible, but essentially, like you will have this. And so I stood on it, and then it wasn't a couple of days later that I got that call and got out. So no, I got out of the military fulfilled, but I got out because I wanted to start a family, and I prayed that, like, God, could I have this so that way I can get out and not regret things, and just have long-term peace of mind.
Right.
And He gave me that.
Wow.
Kind of weird, but pretty cool, because like now I don't have these thoughts of like, oh, do I need to go back and do this? It's like, I did what God called me to do. Now I'm where God has me now.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha. So tell me about the transition then from military life into civilian life, because we hear all the time. Pretty sure you hear all the time. I hear all the time from either friends that have gone to the military, or my relatives that have gone through, that the transition from the military back into civilian life is really, really challenging, and tough sometimes, especially people who are dealing with PTSD, and they've seen things, especially people who have been gone on deployments. How was it for you?
It was the hardest thing I've ever done, and harder than I could describe.
Okay.
You're, especially as a special operator, you're in this like elite class of specimens, and you're like doing this awesome purpose. And then I'm like a fishing guide. And I'm like, it's like no one knows, which is fine. Like you're a silent warrior. You don't do it for recognition. But you're like, man, like a couple months ago, I was like in this like HVI's house, like, like winning a war.
Yeah.
And now like I'm in Washington doing what, like, and so I had this whole identity crisis, dude. Like my whole identity was like, who am I? What am I doing? Why did I get out? I shouldn't have got out. Like, like now I have that security of, but like initially, I did question. I was like, that's who I am. Like I'm able bodied, like guys are going back to Iraq, like, and I'm like, what do I do? And I had this whole identity crisis, man. Like I I went through a lot of like crazy family issues. Um, I came back from that deployment, dude. I lost everything. Everything, bro, was gone. Was my family was gone. All my everything I owned was stolen and sold. I was locked out of my own storage unit.
What the heck?
Crazy. So I had this intense betrayal. Um, but I was facing it by seeking the Lord. I was in something called Pure Desire, and that was really life changing. I did it over Zoom while I was on deployment because I was afraid that I'd come back and just completely fall apart. And so, like one of my friends, Dennis, we still keep in contact to this day. I think he's actually watching. But he was like essentially my accountability partner from then, like 3 years ago, and we still keep in touch. So experiences like that, and then God led me here into Hungry Gen, and like I was at Hungry Gen probably the first week I was there, maybe the second, just checking it out, and dude, I got healed of TBI, traumatic brain injury. From experiences like in that story I told you, and eating different charges, not like eating C4, but like put a charge on a wall and then you don't get proper minimum safe distance, and you get these shock waves.
Right.
And it rattles your brain, and you can get it from a car wreck, you can get it from a lot of different things, but I had it from explosions. And it made me real irritable, sensitivity to light. The fact that I can sit here with all these crazy lights, like, is a act of God.
Wow.
And my neck has gotten healed, my back has gotten healed. So I started to experience like the power of the Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
And even though I was saved back in 2008 through the military, experiencing healing, deliverance, like from these type of things, like, yeah.
That's crazy.
That brought me out of that identity crisis and this like death that I was experiencing, to where now I can have peace in my life.
Wow. Wow. So you're experiencing all these miracles in your life. And tell me, to kind of like let's dive into more deeper about this identity crisis. Did you at all feel like, during this whole thing, that you weren't, like, when these miracles were happening, did you feel a sense of gratitude immediate, or did you feel like, I don't deserve this? What, like, what was going through your mind when you were going through this?
Interesting you asked that, because now I remember that wasn't my first time at Hungry Gen, because I was there once before. And they were praying for healing on stage, and they mentioned this exact injury I had, and they said, raise your hand if that's you. And I felt unworthy, so I didn't raise my hand, even though I knew it was me.
Wow.
And then when I went back, they actually brought it up again. And that's when I did raise my hand, and I took that step of like, no, I want healing. I break agreement with this, and I want to be free.
Wow.
And I receive freedom and healing. Yeah.
And I'm just kind of seeing this visually, and the fact that it didn't happen the first time because you basically refused it.
Yeah, I rejected it.
You rejected it. And then it being brought up again the second time is almost like God being like, hey,
dude,
like I have this ready for you.
Yeah.
You just have to reach out your hand and take it.
Yeah.
Because we all know that healing is a gift that Jesus died for on the cross to be able to give to us freely.
Yeah.
All we have to do is just reach out and take it. So tell me about that. Tell me about that second time that it was offered and then you took it. Were you like when you first take me to the moment when you first realized that the healing had taken place?
Yeah. So I realized first that my neck was healed. So I'm 90% VA disabled. I get, I get compensated for my injuries. And so a lot of that was like TBI, neck, back injuries, and then like shoulder, different stuff. But yeah, I was getting prayed over. People were laying their hands on me, praying for me, and I'm like, I got my head bowed, but I'm more doing it like feeling my neck pain. So I look like I'm praying, but I am praying, but I'm more of like feeling my neck tension.
Gotcha.
And then I feel it just release, bro. And I'm like, whoa, I haven't had this in a long, like, I don't know. And so I'm like, bro, I'm like so freaking out about my neck and back being like healed that like, and it's crazy because afterwards I talk with Pastor Bryson, and I'm like, man, like who you and Pastor Casey were like speaking about while you were praying, like that was me, and I just got healed. And I was new to Hungry Gen, didn't know about testimonies. He brings me over to Danny, and she brings me up on stage the next service to talk about the testimony.
Wow.
All those crazy lights like were in my eye, and I didn't even realize that I'd been healed from TBI at the time. So I'm giving this testimony of being healed from my neck and my back, and I didn't even know at the time that I was healed from TBI.
Wow.
And then afterwards, I was like, I realized like when I went home, I was like, those lights were super bright and they didn't bother me. And I'm noticing that like I'm not having to sit in a dark room by myself for an hour and be weird and to just like revive socially.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
wow.
And so like, dude, I was healed from all of that, like instantly.
Crazy. So it wasn't like in packages or like in different, time periods. It was at the same time.
Yeah, and I had been delivered before. I didn't really know what was going on, but I believe from death right before Hungry Gen, and so that was kind of a layer of it.
Gotcha.
But the healing of TBI and a bunch of that stuff was like right then, boom.
Wow.
And there's been more like healing since. Like I won't say like my back never bothers me at all. But
For sure.
logic in it too, and
For sure.
so
Man, that's crazy. So I'm just blown away because there were so many opportunities in your deployments where the enemy could have taken you out.
Yeah.
Like there was probably some moments where you were like this close to death.
Yeah.
And the fact that you are sitting with me right now, God has transitioned you out of what He originally called you to do, and you obeyed. You got through that, and now God is calling you into a different, different thing, and it just shows that God had His hand on you the whole entire time, and He was like, you could have died for my name.
Yeah.
In battle.
Yeah.
But I didn't have that plan for you. And so now, transitioning into this new season of your life, what are you doing now? What's your ministry? What are you doing for work now? And then from there, I'm going to ask you, kind of like, how are you using what you learned and the experiences you had in the military and past experiences even before that, and you're applying that to your everyday life now and what you're doing. So what are you doing now?
Yeah. So so now I do a few things. Um, my I don't even really want to call it a job, but I serve as a police officer. That's more of a newer thing. Uh, so I've stepped into that role this last year, and in addition to that, I do essentially an outdoor ministry, uh, and that's why I brought up the stuff in my childhood as me escaping into the outdoors because um, that's carried on throughout my life, and still like when I'm overwhelmed, I want to go hunting and fishing, and so what I do now is um, I have different people that I maybe have served with or serve with now, or that I meet and I'll invite them and to go hunting or fishing, and I'll dangle this in front of them, and then Jesus. And so it's like it's my kind of low profile ministry of man, grown men have like just started bawling on the boat. Like,
Wow.
we get away and start, I pray that the Holy Spirit gives me discernment and then just kind of start poking.
Mm.
And then, yeah, so that's what I do now. And then, obviously at Hungry Gen, involved in, the ministry stuff that we do together and then all that. But
So, so tell me a little more about this ministry that you do. And is it a nonprofit? Is it not for profit?
it's not a nonprofit now because so I don't charge, but it's an LLC right now just because of kind of the process of things.
Okay.
But currently, it's not a nonprofit, but I don't charge veterans or law enforcement, first responders to come.
Okay. So when you first decided to do this, was it more of like a natural transition into doing it because it just made sense, or was it a specific like God telling you, "Hey, I want you to do this thing," and you just said yes to it?
It was both.
Well, okay.
There was a lot of intentionality behind it, and a lot of preparation. And so I had a lot of different offers to be a guide in um, Patagonia, even like Alaska, different places around the world. And I had really great opportunities, um, but the Holy Spirit channeled me here.
Mm.
And yeah, I I now own property on the Yakima River, which you've been to, and you helped me move in. Thank you.
Wow, it's
And
an amazing place out there.
yeah, it's awesome. And the way that I got the property is all God. Got it from a local law enforcement guy, and he was also a sniper on the SWAT team. And then we ended up like it was just all God ordained, and we just talked sniping stuff for a long time. And he's like, "I'm going to sell you the property," and I was like, "Cool." And so my vision is to use that, build a lodge for veterans and law enforcement to stay there during the trips. So do floating fishing trips for them, and yeah, man, a lot of intentionality and preparation, and it's just going to keep building. It's in the very early stages.
Wow, that's awesome. That's
Yeah.
awesome. So take me take me to some moments where you're on the boat, or you're in the on the trail, doing hunting. Take me to some moments where you experienced those intentional moments of evangelism, and where where the Lord really used you to impact these individuals.
Yeah. One was pretty recent. Uh, a buddy, he came with me, and we started. I started being like super real with him about certain things. And long story short, he agrees to come to church the next day. He shows up to Hungry Jane, gets saved.
Wow.
Um,
Wow.
uh, as amazing as that one was, and how much wave tops I did, I really want to focus on this one which was I brought 2 veterans out. One of them, he was a sniper years ago, and he had never told anyone this story, even his wife. But he had, given the situation, he had to shoot someone that was unarmed, and there's a lot more to it. But it's not really my place to tell the details of the story.
Right.
It was a very difficult situation, and like I said, he'd never even told his wife this. As I'm talking to him, we're floating through the Yakima Canyon, fly fishing for trout, and I start feeling the Holy Spirit, like ask him certain specific things, and he I felt this like resistance, and so I told him a story where I was in a situation that was very difficult on a deployment, and he finally realized that it was like he had someone that would understand. And so he told me the story, and because I pretty much said similar thing, and dude, he bawled on the boat, dude, and just like we prayed, and dude, he got so much like healing from it.
Wow.
And it was unbelievable.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So this, I mean, this, even though this business, you know, this, would you call it a side business, or is it?
I call it ministry because I've charged for 2 trips, and they were both from civilians that just wanted to go fishing.
Yeah.
And all I charged was enough to break even for the gas. So I do my own work. Like, I'm blessed with making decent money, and I do this as ministry. So I
Gotcha.
put my own money into these trips. So
That's
yeah,
so cool.
I don't call it a business, even though it has a business label.
Right.
But that's for my vision moving forward. But no, it's ministry all the way.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So so this is your ministry. You've gone all out for it.
Yeah.
So looking back to, you know, when you first got saved, what was back in, you said 2008 or something?
Yeah.
Okay. If you were to go back to that point, could you have seen, you know, where you are now from where you were then? Or, you know, if you were to go back and tell yourself that this is where you are right now, would you believe yourself? Or would you be like, yeah, that sounds about right?
It's a good, like, really hard question. I like to, I don't really know. I mean, every year, you know, in the school I was in, at least, we'd get these character trait awards, like, this person is honest or whatever. Like, mine was always determination or perseverance, like, all the time.
Gotcha.
So I was like a very driven kid. And so I probably would have been like, cool, you know, but I don't really, I don't know. I know. I also think part of the other side of me would have been like, yeah, I just want to hunt and fish. So, yeah,
Gotcha.
that's all I got for you on that.
That's cool. That's cool. Are there any other key moments, you know, in your ministry time, that really stuck out to you, and that really kind of confirmed for you that was like, this is where God has me, and this is legit?
Yeah, I mean, I have a newfound passion for taking kids fishing. Pastor Martin and his son Vince came with me recently, and like, dude, seeing that kid catch his first fish,
Yeah.
and like crushing more fish was, dude, it made me so happy.
That's awesome.
So yeah, man, that was a big one. I've had a lot of really good trips, really have, and getting to spend time with other like-minded guys, and then give back to people. Every single trip is fulfilling, and people like always tell me like how what it did for them. So yeah,
That's so cool. That's awesome. I have two more questions for you. Meantime, guys, do you mind if they have any questions to put in the comments? If you guys have any questions that you'd like to ask him, about virtually anything, go ahead and drop in the comments, and I will try and look for your questions in the comments right now. But be thinking of the questions you want to ask, and we'll address them shortly. My last two questions are these. What are some skills/knowledge you learned during your time in the military that you now apply to your current job, ministry, and spiritual life?
there's a lot there. I'll say the three things that the Holy Spirit's been doing in my life the last couple years. One, my number one prayer is for spiritual hunger. That I would be hungry and crave more, more of the presence of God. That I would, respect the anointing, have reverence for His name.
That's good.
And then another is suffering, like I don't know any mighty men of valor and mighty men of God that didn't go through hard things, and understanding that being a Christian is not being called to a life of comfort.
Wow.
It's being called to a life of persecution and a hard life, and it's almost like something to be proud of. It's like that God would allow me to be able to suffer for Him. There's all these sayings and different things that I did in the military: pain, misery, suffering, suffer patiently, patiently suffer. I got tattoos of that stuff. Like I don't get tattoos anymore because just where I am in my walk with God, I don't get tattoos anymore. Some might see that I have them. That was before I got unlukewarm, that I got lit on fire, and so yeah, man, just being hungry, praying, and when you're going through these seasons of suffering and seasons of waiting, of yeah, this might not be easy, and I might not even want to pray right now, but God, make me hungry for you. And actually, as I was praying and in the Word last night, there was this verse I came across that encompassed all of this. And if you're cool, I can read it real quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
And it actually encompasses all of those things. And it's Hebrews 5, 7 through 8 in the ESV. In the days of his flesh, Jesus offered up prayers and supplications with loud cries and tears to him who was able to save him from death. And he was heard because of his reverence. Although he was a son, he learned obedience through what he suffered. And I was like, man, that just encompasses the last couple of years. So yeah, it's not turning when we're faced with these difficult things, these triggers of life and these hard circumstances, and coping with the temporary fix, but it's instead turning, connecting with the Lord and being like, I'm going to face this, and I believe that you are good regardless of how I feel, that you are the healer, that you are my deliverer, that you will set me free, and believing and standing in that and having the reverence, the respect of God, the deep respect of God, you are good regardless of my situation. You are good. I will suffer. I will do whatever. I will be obedient, and I want more. Wow. And that encompasses what God has been doing in my life.
Wow, that's so good. That's so good. A question just came to mind that I want to address. The moments in your deployments, the moments of when you were in the heat of combat, did you ever question your faith or your status of a Christian? Because there's some Christians that they take the commandment, thou shalt not kill, literally for all situations.
Yeah.
And here you are, special ops, in the thick of it, where killing someone is may be your only choice in solving the situation.
Yeah.
Or your assignment is to kill someone no matter the situation, and you have to obey orders.
Yeah.
How, in those moments, did you justify that?
So I never questioned my my beliefs, my faith in God. If anything, it strengthened it. I saw God's protective hand. I saw such amazing things. Um, like, first of all, the command is, "Thou shalt not murder," right? And so there's a difference. And also, I would also tell that person, and I would encourage them to read their whole Bible, because there's more than that.
It's true.
Read Joshua, read 1st, 2nd Samuel, read Kings. Read where Jehu rode like a madman and went up and said, like, "Throw her down, Jezebel." They threw her down, smashed her face, and dogs came and ate her. Like, there's parts in Joshua where they put their foot on the necks of the kings of the enemy. Like, I don't care if people agree with what experiences I've been through, because I experienced it and I know. I have seen what God has done, and so I'm not here to be passive and to try to appease everyone. Um, I'm not here to meow like a kitty cat. I want to roar like a lion for Jesus. And you're not going to have the anointing and the being distinguished as a minister of God if you're afraid to be obedient. And so,
That's
yeah,
good.
man, I would just say, like, hey, like, read the whole Bible, read the Word, and just be open. Don't have this religious mindset of, and I would dive into that commandment, and yeah, it's war is you don't deploy on a deployment and then just go be like, I have a gun, I'm not going to use it. So
It's true. It's true.
yeah.
There's that. There's that. If you could go back and do anything differently, take me back to that moment, recall it, and tell me what you would do differently if you did.
Any specific area or in general?
Yeah, just in general. Like if there was a moment where it's like, yeah, I would have done that differently, or um, if there was a moment where if you did go back and do it differently and you knew it would alter your course, would you?
There's one thing I regret, um, and but I don't know if, as miserable as it was and how much I wish I didn't have to experience that. I don't know if I would go back and change it, because um, I was set free of so much, and God did so much in me to prepare me moving forward,
Yeah.
specifically for a future family. Like, you know, I haven't looked at pornography in 3 years. I haven't had a sip of alcohol in over two.
Wow.
I have given up things that, like I said before, I did behind closed doors, and a lot of that was linked to needing deliverance.
Gotcha.
And so, um, I think those hard experiences were necessary, almost, to get that stuff out of me, in preparation for what God has ahead. So, I'm excited for what God has in the future, and I feel more prepared.
That's awesome. That's good. Um, Man, this is this is amazing. This is amazing.
You're amazing,
Um,
bro.
Thank you. Uh, so, okay, I have one more question for you, and then we'll get into questions with the audience if they have any. So you had a faith upbringing with no deliverance.
Yeah.
No idea of deliverance. What was it like experiencing deliverance for the first time? And were you initially hesitant at first to receive deliverance, or did you go and just
Really, the first experience I had, I didn't even know it was happening. I was just hungry and I wanted to be free, but I didn't, like, of course, throughout the Gospels, it's full of deliverance, but I had never seen it today. And so I was getting prayed for, and I was actually running security at a different church, and the service was in Spanish, and so I didn't understand anything, but I felt the presence of God so powerfully. And as the service was ending, I go off to the side and I ask one of the guys, like, "Hey, can you just stand in agreement and pray with me?" Because I didn't want to like take, but I wanted so bad to just like ask the little bit, like a little bit of just like, can someone agree with me and pray with me? And he goes and grabs his brother, Pastor Edgar, who runs a church in Kennewick, and he's one of my favorite humans. And him and his brothers come over, and he's like, it was like the manliest thing ever. He tells him, he's like, "Give me the oil." And I was like, "Oh man!" And like, he like gets the oil and he like throws it on his hand, and I'm like, "Dude, this is intense." And dude, like, it's really hard to explain, but I felt like I was like surrounded by lions. Like, yeah, take that however you want, but that's how I felt. And I saw people falling around as I'm in the back, like protecting, guarding the door. And I'm like praying. I'm like, "God, like, I'm down for whatever you want to do, but I'm not gonna fall. Like, I'm not going to just lay down for a show. If the preacher pushes my head, I'm gonna push back." Like, I was being stubborn, but I was like, that being said, I'm down for whatever you want to do, but it's got to be you. I'm not gonna fake anything.
Yeah.
And dude, like, I got rocked, bro. Like, that was when I realized that some of the falling down, I'm like, okay, like, I'm not gonna just say that person's faking it, because like, dude, I got rocked and I jolted to the ground. And even when I'm on the ground, I'm like, ah, and I'm like trying to push myself up, and like someone threw a blanket on me, which was like, this is weird, but I don't know what's going on. And then yeah, dude, my life was so much different after that. And I didn't even go for deliverance, but I definitely, you and I both know, like, I got set free. And then from there, it was like, some one-on-one stuff with Casey. I went through prayer line at Hungry Gen, and was like going through the prayer line at Hungry Gen. Like, it didn't manifest, but it's like, you're like, oh man, like, what's going to happen? And all these things start coming. But yeah, man, it's just been an awesome journey to the point where now, I get to do this for other people, and just watching people's lives get changed is just it's the new, like, greatest fulfilling thing in my life.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Let's see if we have any questions here. Nothing yet. I am actually surprised. But let's close out this interview with this. Where do you see the Lord taking you with your ministry? Where do you feel like the Lord is leading you now?
Yeah. What's heavy on my heart is family. The word that I've been getting recently is establish. He's establishing me, being faithful in the local church, Hungry Gen. Not neglecting responsibilities there, but also being faithful at my work. And so, like, balance, and I have visions of where I when I go there. I have aspirations, and it's all the way. So, but yeah, and then just more of what God's doing. I'm hungry, like I told you. I am my number one prayer is that I would be relentless in my hunger for the Holy Spirit and, respect his presence in my life. So yeah, I'm just open to what he's doing, but it's with purpose and very strategic. And so, yeah, I think I'm on the right path of certain things, and I'm excited to see what he does.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much, man, for coming on the podcast and
Yeah, man.
coming in person to the studio. I'm really, really grateful that you said yes to sharing your story and sharing your testimony, and sharing what God has done, is doing, and what He plans on doing in your life. It's just awesome.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem, guys. Well, thank you so much, guys, for tuning in to the podcast. I'll see you guys. Well, it's supposed to be next week, actually, for the first episode of the month. Remember, this podcast is every first and third Saturday of the month, and this was just a bonus episode because I couldn't wait to get this guy on. And we have a bonus episode when there's an extra Saturday in the month, and so this was the fifth Saturday, so we did a bonus episode. Guys, if you haven't already, like and share the broadcast. It's not too late to do so, so people can watch the broadcast when it replays on YouTube and on Facebook. Anyways, thank you guys so much, and we'll see you guys next time. Peace.